Now, a release aid is the thing that we pull back with. There's all different variations of release aids. There's trigger release aids, so whether that be a pointer finger or a thumb trigger. There's back tension, which means that as you pull back, it eventually releases based on the poundage that's being sent through that release aid. And then there's a hinge, which is where you essentially same sort of concept. You pull, and eventually it gets to a point where the mechanism releases and it just fires off. Now, back tension and the hinge release, the concept of these is that it automates a surprise release, which is a great way to get into hunting or bow hunting in particular. Because what happens with the trigger is if you punch the trigger, which means like pulling on the trigger really fast or thinking at that point in time, this is when I need to shoot. So you press the trigger or you punch it with your finger or your thumb, depending on which trigger variation you're using. What happens is that makes more erratic shots, and the movements that will happen with that typically are going to be quite drastic, and you'll not have a repeatable process. Okay. So where a back tension or a hinge comes into action is that it is like a surprise release. So you're constantly aiming, and what you'll find is when you aim, your pin will move all over the spot. So the pin being what's inside of the sight that we're aiming with. And so you'll have your pin on your target and it will just move. It will float. It will do figure eights. It'll go up and down and all over the place, and it'll come back into space with the target of where you want to shoot, and then it will move off. Okay. So not necessarily something you can greatly control. And so what you can do instead is, instead of just punching the trigger when you're like, okay, we're doing a drive by and we're on target, bang, trying to pull it, that's a really bad habit to get into and not a great way for, like I said, a repeatable, consistent shot. And so the back tension ones do work really well. The other variation of this is, using a trigger like a back tension release. And this is what I try to do. I will pull back into position. I'll hook my finger over the top of the bow or over the top of the trigger, and I'll either go for a slow pull, meaning I'm pulling back through my elbow, so making the whole arm move. And what happens is eventually, because I'm locked in place, my trigger's here, what will happen is eventually it snaps and takes my shot off. Okay. Same thing can be done for a thumb release. You're pulling back, and eventually you're going to pull enough tension that up against the thumb and it, boom, shoots off.